Welcome to the first STRI Group podcast. My name's Christian Spring and I'm Principal Scientist here at STRI Group, and I'm joined today by Mark Murphy.
Hello everyone, how's things? Thanks for having me on the first podcast, Christian. I'm delighted to be here so I am and kind of get my story out of how I got into the industry.
Brilliant. Well, we look forward to delving into that later. This week we're going to be talking about staff, education, getting people into our industry, routes of entry into industry, what kind of the state of the union, if you like, of greenkeeping and grounds personship, in terms of where are we at with recruiting new people to join our industry. There's been some interesting surveys come out over the past 6 months from different sports bodies such as Bigger and the GMA, which have kind of highlighted a few issues that I think we're all aware of in our sports turf industry. One of the most sort of enlightening ones was the one that was done by Bigger, and that was surveying 1,300 greenkeepers across the UK, and there were some interesting factoids that came out of that. 35% of greenkeepers are currently looking for work away from golf, which is a third of greenkeepers are looking at exit from our industry, which is a little bit worrying. And then obviously when we look wider than that, we can see that sort of 83% of golf clubs were admitted that they were struggling to recruit new people coming into their facilities, and that 53% of teams were running at less than full strength. So all of these things are kind of pointing towards there's a little bit of a staff crisis, certainly coming out of that survey work in greenkeeping. And that kind of ties into conversations I've been having over the past sort of 12 to 18 months really. Post-pandemic, we've had the little bit of an upsurge in people playing golf, interest in golf, but talking to businesses in a variety of industries, people are reevaluating what they want to do, where they want to do it, and their work-life balance, and certainly golf is no exception to that. It looks like there are guys and gals out there that are feeling that they want to have a different career direction, a different challenge, and that increase in upsurge in popularity of golf, which is brilliant. But flip side, we need the bodies to be able to manage the golf courses and the turf, and that seems a bit of a struggle. And we've seen that in STRI as well, getting people coming in, and other businesses I go and see and talk to. Recruitment is a bit of a challenge at the minute. So that's a bit of a state of the union of greenkeeping. In grounds maintenance, it's a little bit different, perhaps slightly less doom and gloom, but certainly there are some significant issues at play in terms of from a survey that was carried out by the GMA, 13% of professionals in grounds maintenance were planning on retiring in the next 3 years. So there's a significant chunk of people with a lot of experience planning to exit grounds maintenance. And whilst there's a high level of satisfaction from their survey, 86% of the professionals surveyed were either satisfied or very satisfied with their jobs. It did highlight that there was a potential lack of young people coming into the grounds management industry, and also a potential lack of training places and training pathways to bring youngsters into the grounds management industry, which I think is, again, a bit of a concern. So there's some real challenges there. Mark, have you got what's your perspective on where we're at as an industry with staffing and resourcing and some of the challenges we're facing?
I think, from my opinion, it's considered as not really a glamorous job. You know, people think you're outside all day, you're wet, you're cold, but I think there is actually two different sides of it. And coming from my experience of kind of like a full year's greenkeeping, it's brilliant in the summer. You're outside all day cutting grass, the grass is growing, loads of jobs, you're working plenty of hours. And then conversely, when it gets into the winter time, it starts getting dark, it starts getting cold, it starts raining, and it can become quite a dark place. You when you leave for work in the morning, it's dark, you're almost waiting on the sunlight to come up. and then when you're heading home, it's dark again. So I think it's that's the main thing. It's not really, you know, a glamorous job as such, but it's quite important, and especially after COVID, post-pandemic, we've seen how important golf was one of the first things to actually open up again, and people was out playing golf. And I don't know the stats, but I think even myself, I started playing golf over the pandemic. Not very good as such yet. Hoping to improve. Spent a lot of time out in the golf course this year, but yeah. So that's my opinion on the matter.
And I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I know myself working when you're working outdoors a lot. In the summer, when the sun is shining, it's a brilliant place. You're happy to work as many hours as you can do. But when it gets cold and dark, wet and windy, of course, it becomes a little bit more off-putting. And I think there is an element of kind of enjoyment out of the job. I mean, for me, talking to members of the industry, I think there is certainly some threads that run through this in terms of how people see and treat turfgrass managers, greenkeepers, groundspeople. Almost sometimes there's a little bit of a feeling of second-class citizens within the industry, and that comes to me and struck through when I was reading that bigger survey, when they were looking at some of the things that golf clubs don't provide that were obviously of concern to the people asked in the survey. So the key things that were coming up repeatedly were no offices for greenkeeping staff. So nowhere to go and work and perhaps study. Sort of 29% of clubs weren't providing drying or changing facilities, which means getting warm, getting dry clothes on, making sure that you've got dry clothes for the start of your next shift is really important. And that can be very demoralising, I guess, when you're putting soggy, wet, stinky clothes on again for another full shift out on the golf course. Making sure something simple as 45% of clubs not providing Wi-Fi in their maintenance facilities. I mean, I'm an old fella these days, but I'm almost lost when there's no Wi-Fi around where I can hook my phone up to check out what's going on Twitter and Facebook. So not having Wi-Fi in that facility, whereas there is in the clubhouse, can only create a divide, and that can't be good. No washroom facilities, and sort of 29% of clubs not having kitchen facilities, dedicated kitchen facilities for the greenkeeping team. And then one which is really food for thought is that sort of 79% of clubs are not providing single-sex changing and toilet facilities for female members of the team, which is, this day and age, is we've got to look down on it. It's something that, how can we create a gender level playing field, a place where we have diversity in people in our industry without providing them the essential facilities that they would consider in other walks of life essential. So I think there are certainly some things there which almost cry out of not necessarily valuing the expertise, the talent, the skills of greenkeepers. And I think for me that's an important part of perhaps what makes a turn-off even for this really valuable, really important, because without the hard work of all the boys and girls out there managing golf courses, football pitches, they wouldn't exist. They're essential to that business and that facility operation, and they should be treated as valued and important members of that team. And I think that's important that goes along with that. Another interesting factoid that I happened to notice that came out in that is there's only 1 in 4 golf clubs that have undertaken any kind of outreach into their local community to try and promote greenkeeping as an important career. And that goes, for me, it's a bit of a bugbear at the minute. It's a bit of a get on a soapbox here for a second, but it's something that I think is really important. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, Mark. Chip in, because I will tend to keep on chatting. But for me, it's we work in an industry where we are working in the world's biggest science lab. That is the outdoors. That's nature. Our golf courses, our football pitches. It's STEM. It's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in action. And the professionals that manage these facilities and these surfaces to create excellence are absolutely at the forefront of practical science. They're doing science and technology in every day of their lives. And I think it's something that we should be communicating much more strongly to youngsters at school, so that we can get across the message that you don't have to be an academic nerd like me. You can absolutely be engaging in science and technology and engineering in a very practical sense as well, by understanding and working with your hands, with your mind, on vocationally on golf courses, managing sports surfaces, building sports surfaces, and that's tremendously important to me. And it's something I know we don't do very well, and something that I personally want to do a lot more of going forward, is try and promote the science and technology in our industry to everyone and anyone that will listen.
You are correct, Christian, and so people would be asking me, oh Mark, how are you getting on in your job? How are you enjoying working with the STRI? I see you're doing so much travelling, I see you're here, you're there, you're everywhere. And people is actually so interested in me. But when I was doing groundskeeping, they almost would have looked at, you're just cutting grass, Mark. What are you doing? Just you're driving from where I lived in Monaghan to Dublin every day, an hour and a half each way, just to cut grass. That's all I ever got. And now it's, oh, fantastic, you're flying here, you're flying there. So definitely, yeah, Christian, you are correct.
And I think that's important. It's anybody, if a person feels empowered, valued in their job, they're going to be motivated, they're going to be positive, they're going to do the best possible job. And I think that's really important. We look at why this trend of not having the bodies we need to help ensure that we can produce world-class sports facilities across the board at every single level of sport. It's vital that we tackle this, and we don't be afraid to look under all the stones and really try and get to the grips with the root causes and promote it. It's a tremendous industry, and that leads me on to Mark. So how did you get into this weird and wacky world that is sports turf management?
Very interesting, and by accident or by chance. So I come from a farming background, a small beef and sheep farm at home. My father's self-employed, so he always does like a small bit of farming on the side. So originally I was always into agriculture, but more so livestock. Where I come from in Monaghan is kind of like in between Dublin and Belfast, so it's right in the border region, but it's rural Ireland. Our nearest shop, school, pub could be 5 miles away, so we are definitely in the middle of nowhere. So throughout school I had no clue really what I wanted to do. I kind of knew I wanted to take some path in agriculture, but I didn't know whether I wanted to go down a level 6 or 7 or go to university and do the full level 8. Eventually it was actually my mother convinced me and just said, Mark, go do the level 8, you can always come home and work for your father, so you can. So eventually then I started looking down routes and options of what I can actually achieve, and I applied to University College Dublin to do horticulture, landscaping and sports turf management as part of it's an agricultural science degree. Yeah. So the first 2 years you kind of spend your time doing chemistry, physics, maths, biology, soil science, bits of business, and then you move into your more then you move into kind of things like your horticulture, your sports turf management, sports turf construction, plant physiology kind of modules. And during that time, he actually works for STRI. His name's Greg Waitley. He lives in Ireland now, but still works with the company. So he comes in every year to give us, or well, when I was a student, a guest lecture. And he pulled up his PowerPoint, and he had a slide of all the places he'd been in the last year, and there must have been 20 different countries. And I said that was a fantastic job and an area that I would love to get into. So I approached him at the end of the class, and I said, my name's Mark, I love your job, I want to find out more about it. And obviously he passed on all his details, told me to look up the STRI, told me all the information I needed about them. And I'll tell you a good story. Earlier on, was it last year, myself and Greg was sitting in the city centre of Turin, and I pulled out my wallet, and I still had his business card that he gave to me on that day. So I did.
Amazing.
Yeah, I kept it with me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so, how would you say? Obviously, you've spent some time being a greenkeeper. How long were you greenkeeping for?
So my kind of route was after university, actually, I'll go back a step before that. During my university, we have to do a 16-week professional work placement. So I knew myself, because I wasn't a greenkeeper before that I needed some hands-on experience. I was learning all about the technical side of it, but hadn't actually sat on a Toro mower yet, which, as you know, Christian, is critical. So I applied to a couple of different places, and I was kind of just wanted to pick the highest level. Well, my love was in sports pitches and football pitches.
Yeah.
So I basically set myself to get the highest level pitch I could get. So the furthest I got was the FAI in Dublin in Abbottstown. So that was working for a construction company who had a contract with the FAI to actually maintain the facilities. My advantage was they were also constructing the IRFU grounds in Abbottstown and the cricket, it's Ireland Cricket, I think it's called. So I actually got to see different phases of constructions, grow-ins, and then right through to day-to-day maintenance, which to me now is invaluable. And I was thinking back then, why am I learning about how to grow in a cricket square now? But obviously when you move over to the UK, cricket is a lot more important than it is in Ireland. So
welcome to Yorkshire.
Yeah. So I finished my 16-week placement, went back to university, done my dissertation, so I did, in playing characteristics of golf greens and sports pitches. Right in the middle of that, the pandemic happened, so we were all sent home from university and had to actually finish my dissertation from home. Obviously I'd no library, so the old STRI bulletins was a great help. So they were. So whenever I had my university course finished, I was approached back by the same construction company to cover someone actually who was off ill. So I was back up to Dublin and back, and that's when I done my full year's greenkeeping, until my opportunity at STRI came up, that I jumped at.
And so I think it's a good opportunity now for you to talk a little bit about your role that you do with us now. So explain a little bit about your role here in STRI. What does that mean on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story. During my interview, I asked, so what does I'm a design consultant with STRI, by the way, but I asked, it was Lee Collier, what is a day-to-day role for a design consultant? And he started laughing, so he did. He goes, you can be at anything, Mark. You can be anywhere in the world, from designing a dressage arena for horses, right the way to your local sports facility where you could be designing a cricket square. So a lot of my work now at the minute revolves around feasibility studies, so actually on the ground, getting out, going and assessing it, from anything from a local pitch to a greenfield site. So I would go out, dig some test pits, get like a really good representative kind of sample of the whole area, and make sure we've all the points covered, as in outlets, what the surface evenness is like. And then we'll come back and write a feasibility report, so we will submit that to the client. Then after the feasibility stage is done, you would mostly move on to the design specification stage, with myself and our CAD team would be involved in. So that's just writing design specifications, contract documents, mainly for construction companies. Then the other fun part of my job is flying around the world for UEFA. So
you dropped that in last of all. So tell us a little bit about that. What's that involved?
So we do like a lot of remote monitoring for UEFA. So that's all the Champions League games, Conference League games, and Europa League games. So that's all office-based work. Then if a pitch needs tested, or there's some problem with the pitch, we will actually fly out to that country, test the pitch, and pass or fail it, or give it the yes or no. We'll be given on-site recommendations, so saying you need to reduce the height of cut, it needs a feed, and kind of recommendations like that. And we would all put this in a report and actually hand it to UEFA and the grounds team, and kind of working with them as a team. And I think that's it's a really important part of this, because like, we're working behind the scenes, so we are, and that's another thing about groundskeepers, they're always behind the scenes. It would never really get the recognition or deserve, but nobody realizes when someone walks out to a big stadium, the first thing they look at is the pitch. So it is. So that's the other side of my job, and I love it. Look at this year alone, all different climates, different zones. I've been to Estonia, where the pitch was covered with a tent and they were blowing hot air into it, covered in snow mold, right up to Baku in Estonia, where it's 35 degrees. Even Cyprus, I've been there, where it's again 35, 36 degrees. And we're trying to grow cool season grass in this climate, so we are. So it's quite challenging, but really, really enjoyable, and I love it.
I mean, there's a heck of a lot of variety there in your role, where one day it seems like you can be digging up a hole in a wet bog of a pitch, where you're looking to try and get an improvement by improving the infrastructure, to then be sat in the office designing some world-leading sports facility, to the next day flying off globetrotting to some part of the world to go and help solve a particular problem they've got there. How important do you find that variety, that challenge that might come from that, as to keep your interest in the job?
Definitely does, Christian, and I find myself not getting bored, put it like that. So you're jumping around from job to job, but you're never doing one job for long enough that you think, oh, I'm sick of this now, I want to do something else. So there is like a great variation in what I do, and I'm definitely not going to get sick of it anytime soon, so I'm not.
Absolutely. And well, I mean, variety is the spice of life, as the saying goes. So how would you also in a unique position, because you, like many people in our industry, have followed this sort of a pathway of getting into the turf and sports turf industry by, in your case, you're doing some education, you're doing your degree, you've then also been doing practical hands-on greenkeeping grounds maintenance work, and now you're onto the consultancy and design side of it. So that's a sort of like one of the pathways that people follow, is that practitioner to sort of consultant type route. With that unique position, what would you say are some of the similarities and differences and challenges from being a practitioner, hands-on, having the responsibility of managing turf, through to the person who's actually going to be helping to support that individual, giving them advice on how to maybe tackle a particular challenge?
I think in my case, it's really to understand what the greenkeeper or the person who's looking after a stadium across the world is actually going through, and the day-to-day challenges of actually that there might be really heavy rain, it might be -4, there might be snow, it might be 35 degrees, and actually working with them, and not, as I say, when I go out to actually look at a pitch, I'm not there to criticize, we're only there to help. And I think that's important for us, the message that we want to get across, that we're not trying to criticize, we're just trying to help people through a situation, and try and make the best of it for everyone.
And I think that's an important point, is that a large part of the work that STRI and organisations like us do when we're dealing with consultancy is working in partnership with the turf professionals to help, in a collaborative way, get the best out of that piece of turf to meet those particular challenges. And that's something that's important to remember. So it's, for me, our industry, the sports turf industry, offers tremendous potential, tremendous career opportunities from those those folk that want to get very much, they love working in the outdoors, they love working with their hands, they love being practical, and they just love being on a golf course, on a pitch, doing something that you can look back at the end of the day and go, wow, I built that, I did that, I mowed that fairway to perfection, and you can see the striping in it. So we've got that, and we've got the science, and we've got the technology, and we've got the consultancy and the research and the scientists and the boffins like me.
Christian, this is actually a question I've always meant to ask you. How did you get into the sports surf industry?
I've got to throw my mind back a few years now. But I came into this industry completely by accident. I fell into it after having finished my PhD, ironically looking at the benefits of earthworms, and then I come to an industry where we find out all the challenges that earthworms can cause because of their bad toilet habits. But for me, it was very much saw an advert, thought that's an interesting opportunity for someone. Being an academic, being a researcher, being a scientist, I didn't really want to stay in the academic world. I wanted to move into something which is much more vocational, practical, applied, where I could see the benefits. And I didn't really know anything about the sports industry. I didn't certainly know anything about grass or turf. I did know a lot about soil. And so I kind of applied for the job here at STRI, and that was 17 years ago, and I've stayed ever since. And for me, one of the key things that's always kept my interest over all this time is just the sheer variety in the job. And for me, wanting to understand, question why things work the way they do. I was always a nightmare as a kid, taking things apart, but never quite been able to put them back together in the same way. I'm a lot better when it comes to grass and soil these days. But that natural inquisitiveness, that wanting to, and now as that's sort of developed, is passionate for trying to ensure that we promote to people outside of our industry and to youngsters in particular the value of science and how that all I've got to do is look out the window. And here today, looking out the window in Bingley in West Yorkshire, it's a bright blue sky. That's a rarity in itself. A good traditional December day. But I look out the window and I see trees, I see grass, I see animals, I see an ecosystem at work, science at work. And for me, it's being able to persuade and talk to people, and youngsters in particular, about the value of science. And if they want to get involved in science, sports turf industry is a great way to hands-on to learn about science and how you can shape and mould a better world through sport. And that for me is kind of part of the passion of coming through from being obsessive about soils and grass and how we manicure them, through to actually now creating the linkages about how do we make a sustainable planet, and what role does sports have? How can we engage our brains to make the best possible sports surfaces, which are absolutely in harmony with the landscapes they sit, and actually provide ecosystem services and value to our planet and our communities by being these havens for wildlife, for functioning soils and ecosystems, whilst helping people with their mental health, fitness, and all that kind of side of it. So, right, I'm going off on a tangent here, but that's how I got into this industry. But hopefully you could see it's kind of captured my sort of my heart, and certainly makes me passionate about it.
Yeah, so you kind of came down the research route of SRI, and I came more in the design and engineering through like the graduate design consultant before kind of transitioning into not a fully fledged design consultant, because you're always learning, but kind of down that route. What I find the most interesting is that me and you kind of still work together regularly on different projects, whether it's a specification in Saudi Arabia, or whether you're teaching me basis or not the basis foundation, the
full fat basis,
last week. So yeah, like I love working with kind of researchers like yourself and having these conversations. I find it really interesting.
And that's important, is that we've got to make sure that if we're going to make our industry attractive to youngsters, to young people that want to come into it, we've got to make sure that we can articulate the value and the benefit. We've got to be able to articulate the value to them. These days, people are much more aware about sort of the societal and social and environmental consequences and benefits of and impacts of their job. And for me, the sports turf industry is a job where we have an absolute golden opportunity to help shape a better world, a better way of living. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity, and I think we've got to talk about that message much better. So one of the challenges, as we talked about, is getting youngsters into our industry. From your point of view, you're a youngster. I'm the old dog sitting here. I've been around the block, but for a young fella like yourself, what would you say are some of the best ways we can perhaps make our industry attractive to young people?
That is a very good question, Christian. And I think it is about providing that platform or a simple entry route that basically people can get the experience they need before. If you don't have to be a greenskeeper all your life, or if you want to be a greenskeeper all your life, very good. That's when you progress into being a head greenkeeper, and that can be extremely rewarding as well. Whether if you want to do the same route as me, which was kind of more get your degree, get a bit of experience, and then get down the graduate route, that's also very possible too. From my perspective, I don't know if I've kind of fell on my feet or whether I've been given a fantastic opportunity. One thing is about just being extremely passionate about the role and wanting to learn and wanting to develop. And if somebody asks you to go to, where was I this year? Anywhere, Cyprus in the morning, you get up and go, and you just, I feel, for me, I am at the age now where I've no commitments, I can get up, I can go, work hard and try and make a name for myself. But I think in the industry it's about getting people involved, engaged, especially making them feel worthwhile when they're greenkeeping and getting them hooked on it, and then they can progress their career for them, like kind of I did.
Yeah. And so how important did you say it is? I mean, I know it's sort of, you mentioned it earlier, but how important is it for people like who are already in the industry, like Greg, for example, when he came into to your class to talk to you about, gave you a talk about what he did, where he'd been and all the rest of it. How important is that? Do you think we do enough of that engagement as an industry?
Definitely not. So when Greg came in to talk to us, the only reason he was there is because our lecturer at the time, Dr. Alan Hunter, another really passionate man, or it's not a passionate man, a passionate sports turf man, he always said, "Oh, wait till you meet Greg. Greg's coming in. He'll talk to us. And he was just trying to inspire us. And then Greg came in, and me and several others in the class just thought it was the coolest job ever. Couldn't believe that this actually job existed. So I think it's absolutely vital, and it's probably not, we probably don't do enough of it, especially in Ireland. Say there is only one level 8 sports turf course, where in England I'm not actually sure. Do you get asked to go into many universities, or do you go into any agricultural students to actually have a conversation with them and
no.
preach sports turf?
No is the answer, and I think it's probably because many people know what I'm like, and once I start I just can't stop. But I'm also perhaps very excitable, but you're right. I think we need to, as individuals, and I try and do this as much as I can do, promote our industry, promote the values, promote what it can do, that it's a career. I do think it's something we don't do enough of, is just being outward facing. We're good at talking to each other. Often, what in my view, what I've seen, we're not so good at standing outward and talking about our industry, talking about the value it brings, talking about what a career it can actually provide you. And that's something I think that's really important, that we need to do a lot better at. For sure. For me as well, I think it's how you obviously you were talking about your education there, and for me, I've been through education, and I will always talk about the value of it, because it changed who I am and how I think about the world. But I think education for me is another important topic, and having pathways through informal, vocational and formal education is really important, that we can bring not only people through but also allow people to have a pathway for improvement. I mean, what are your thoughts about sort of ensuring that we have career paths for people, have places and directions that people can go? I mean, just from your point of view, you've had a varied career and you're only a youngster. So for you, where would you see yourself going if you were in a job where you felt there was no direction, no progression? How would that make you feel?
I think you'd be extremely oppressed, nearly thinking that I'm trying my best here, I'm trying to do everything I possibly can, and nobody's noticing me, or no one's really saying, good job, Mark, you're doing good. From my perspective, and I think something we are very good here at STRI, is that I think there actually is great opportunities within my career. Like, I can see a path, I can see Greg's pathway and relate that to myself. He had moved over from Ireland, done a graduate program in the STRI, and although now he's moved home, he's still working for the company. He's one of the top design consultants in the world. So like, I can visualize that pathway, but as you say, the challenge is getting everyone to actually envision that pathway.
You're absolutely right, and I think being able to ensure that, going back to something we talked about earlier, about making sure that people feel valued in the career and the progression in the facility they work for, make people feel valued, make them feel part of a valued team, part of a team that's working together for common goals. Give them career progression, give them a pathway, give them education, support them, guide them, nurture them. I often think people, in my simple little mind, very much like the grass that we grow. We've got to give people what they need. We've got to nurture them. We've got to feed them. We've got to water them. I've been a bit too much overfed and watered, it seems. But we've got to help grow the talent. And I think we're all responsible for that. And I think we've all got to be ambassadors for that, to be talking about the value that our industry can bring. And that's important. So if you were to sort of talk about, so in your sort of perspective, from your experience, what would you say are the key benefits from going into a career in turf management, like as a greenkeeper or as a groundsperson?
The opportunities are vast. You can do anything. You can. It's quite a seamless drop, or it's not a drop. It's quite similar to agriculture, so you can kind of bounce in and out of agriculture. So if you're interested in agriculture, I'd say it's definitely something that you should dab your hand in. It is the sports turf industry. And so like, if I wanted to, say, in a couple of years, move home, you could actually become an agronomist in Ireland. You can do anything. There's just such a vast area which you can move in, move out of. I think that's a great point, Mark. I think there is no one single career path. There is no one point of entry. There are many different trajectories you could follow. I think you and I both demonstrate that. Neither of us have been a full-time greenkeeper or groundsperson for years and years. We've come into this industry from very different angles and have got very different career paths, all of which adding value to the people we interact with. And I think no matter whether you're coming in as an apprentice greenskeeper or groundsperson, whether you're going through those stages in your sports facility, becoming sort of first assistant, deputy greenkeeper, course manager, whether it's you're coming in, you are a greenkeeper, you want to move into another area, you go into the sales and product trade, so where you can exercise your skills, honing your agronomy, go in and become a consultant, or like I've done, start off, and we've got youngsters joining our research team here, start off with science and work your way and build your professionalism, your experience, your expertise as a scientist. For me, there are so many different pathways in. We just don't tell people that these pathways exist, and that's something we need to do a lot better of. So I'm aware that time is getting on, and we must wrap up soon. So Mark, have you got any final
questions or comments that you'd like to raise, or you think we've covered it all as we needed to?
Yeah, I think so. We kind of got the points out we wanted to, and I just want to thank you, Christian, for hosting today's podcast and actually driving the car. I appreciate it, and it's always great to have these chats with you, and I think people like me can learn a lot from chatting to people like you.
And I think my final point or parting message to anyone that listens to this podcast: never be afraid to ask. Never be afraid to ask why or how. Never be afraid to ask, how do I get into this industry? How do I advance my career? I'm always ready to listen, and I know most of my colleagues are as well, that we want to help advise and guide, because we're always on the lookout for encouraging talent into not only STRI, being selfish, but also thinking about the industry wider as well. Our industry needs good, hard-working people who are going to be committed and passionate about what they do. Like, hopefully, you and I are, Mark, and hope that's come across today. That, but so the door is always open. Come and ask. Never be afraid to ask a question. So there's always opportunity out there. Never be afraid to knock on the door. And with that note, I think it's a good opportunity to wrap it up. Thank you very much for listening. If you've got any questions, get in touch.